Trent slid the document across his desk like he was handing me a death sentence. The number was circled in red, and my stomach dropped the moment I saw it. A 20% pay cut. Just like that. No warning. No explanation that made sense. "Since you don't work weekends anymore, this is appropriate," he said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk that made my blood boil. I stared at the paper, unable to speak for a moment. The office around us seemed to freeze. Through the glass walls of his office, I could see my coworkers slowing down, pretending to work but really watching what was happening to me. "You're cutting my pay because I won't work weekends?" I finally asked, my voice barely steady. Trent's smirk widened. "Actions have consequences, Riley. You need to understand how this company works." My hands shook as I held that paper. Something inside me shifted that moment. Sure. But something else too. Something that felt like clarity. I walked out of his office with my dignity still intact, but I knew everything had changed. I didn't go back to my desk right away. I needed air. As I walked toward the hallway, I saw him standing there with my files in his hands. A junior designer, barely 23, looking absolutely terrified as he clutched the Baxter campaign folder. The Baxter campaign. I'd spent 4 months building that from nothing. Every sketch, every color choice, every final presentation, that was all me. "Trent told me to take over," the junior said. His voice barely a whisper. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I didn't blame him. He was just following orders. But that didn't stop the humiliation from flooding through me like ice water. I could see Trent watching from his office, satisfied with himself. He'd planned this. The pay cut wasn't random. This was calculated. He wanted me gone, and he was going to make my job impossible until I quit. I nodded at the junior, trying to look calm even though my insides were screaming. As I walked away, my phone buzzed. HR wanted to see me. Course they did. Mira from HR folded her hands on her desk like she'd practiced looking sympathetic in a mirror. She gave me that corporate smile that meant absolutely nothing. "We support leadership's decision completely," she said, her voice smooth and fake. "Weekend participation is essential for our team culture." I blinked at her. "It wasn't essential last month. You never mentioned it before." She shrugged, already looking at her computer. "Company needs evolve, Riley. We all have to adapt." Translation: Trent wants you gone, and HR is going to help him make it happen. I wasn't fighting just one person. I was fighting an entire system designed to crush me. The company had decided I was the problem, and nothing I said would change their minds. As I sat there listening to her explain how flexible scheduling was now a requirement for keeping my job, I realized something. This wasn't about weekends at all. This was about control. Trent wanted to prove he could bend me to his will, and when I refused, he was punishing me for it. I stood to leave, and that's when I noticed the framed print on her wall. My eyes caught on it immediately. Poster. One I recognized instantly because I'd designed it myself. It showed a geometric pattern in blues and purples, with our company name woven through the design. My design. My concept. My weeks of work. But at the bottom in clear letters it said, "Design by Trent." Felt my jaw lock. My chest got tight. "That's beautiful, isn't it?" Mira said casually, following my stare. "Trent made that one himself. He's really talented." I couldn't speak. I just looked at that poster and something inside me broke. Not broke like I was falling apart. Broke like chains breaking. Broke like a door opening to something I needed to see. Trent wasn't just punishing me for refusing to work weekends. He'd been stealing my work the entire time I worked there. Taking credit for designs I'd created. Building his reputation on my talent. And HR was helping him do it, probably without even knowing it. I left her office in a daze. But my mind was already working. Already remembering something important. Something that could change everything. Before I started working full-time at the company, I'd been a freelancer. The company hired me to build their entire brand from scratch. Logo, color palette, typography, everything. That was almost 2 years ago. I had a contract for that work. And in that contract, it said very clearly that the copyrights remained mine. The company could use the designs, but they didn't own them. My hands shook as I dug through my cloud files that night. Years of work, organized perfectly. Found the folder. The contract. Dated, signed, completely legal. Everything I'd created as a freelancer was still my intellectual property. Still mine. Trent had no idea. He thought the company owned everything. But they didn't. Not the logo. Not the color scheme. Not the designs he'd been putting his name on. I read through every page of that contract 3 times, making sure I understood it correctly. Each time it became clearer. I had ammunition. Real, legal, documented ammunition. My phone buzzed. A notification popped up on my screen. Company group chat. Big announcement tomorrow morning. Team meeting mandatory. I stared at that message and wondered what Trent was planning now. The next morning, Trent strutted into the team meeting like he'd just won the lottery. His confidence was disgusting. He stood at the front of the conference room with his arms crossed, soaking up everyone's attention. "We're expanding," he announced, looking directly at me. "A brand new sister company. Fresh vision. Fresh brand. Fresh future." He winked at me. Actually winked. Like this was some kind of inside joke between us. My stomach twisted. A sister company meant a new building, new projects, new everything. It also meant an excuse to eliminate my position entirely. This was the final nail in my coffin. This was Trent saying goodbye. Halfway through the meeting, he turned to me. "Riley, you're dismissed. We need to discuss senior team structure." He'd never done that before. Dismissed me publicly like I was nothing. My co-workers looked uncomfortable. They knew what was happening. Everyone knew. This was my humiliation on display for everyone to witness. I left the conference room with my head up, refusing to let anyone see me break. But inside I was calculating, planning. Trent had just made a massive mistake, and he had no idea. By afternoon, half my workload was gone. My access to certain project files had been revoked. The Baxter campaign was officially the juniors now. My desk felt empty. My calendar looked empty. I was being slowly erased from the company. I opened the pay cut document again, staring at that red-circled number. It represented so much more than money now. It represented everything Trent had done to me. Every time he'd stolen my work. Every time he'd taken credit. Every time he'd smiled while lying. That's when something inside me clicked. I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going to let him push me out quietly. I was going to fight back. But not the way he expected. Not with anger or accusations that would just look like complaints. I was going to hit him with truth. Legal, documented, undeniable truth. I opened my laptop and started making a list of every design I'd created as a freelancer. Every piece of work that was legally mine. I cross-referenced it with the contract. By the time I finished, I had a document 20 pages long. Trent appeared behind my desk suddenly. His shadow falling across my screen. "If you want to make this difficult, I can have HR escort you out," he said coldly. I turned slowly to face him. My heart was pounding, but my voice came out steady and calm. "I'm resigning," I said. He blinked. That wasn't what he expected. He'd expected me to cry or argue or beg to keep my job. "You can't just walk out," he snapped, trying to regain control of the situation. "Yes," I said, standing up. "I can." I unpinned my badge from my desk and placed it carefully on his desk. Then I gathered my personal items into a small bag. Just a few photos, nothing work-related. Nothing that belonged to the company. I walked toward the elevator with my head high. I could feel people watching, unsure what to make of what they just witnessed. But I wasn't thinking about them. I was thinking about what I was about to do. As I walked out of the building, the late afternoon sun hitting my face, I noticed something across the street. The construction site for the new sister company. It was nearly finished, a modern glass building that looked sleek and expensive. One of the tarps covering the construction site had blown loose in the wind. As I walked closer, I could see something printed on the building's wall underneath. Something huge and metallic that caught the light. My breath stopped. It was my logo. The one I'd designed as a freelancer. The one that legally belonged to me. There it was, blown up to the size of a car, displayed on the front of their new sister company building. My design. My work. My intellectual property. Used without permission. Used without payment. Displayed publicly like they owned it. I pulled out my phone and started taking photos. Lots of them. Close-ups, wide shots. Photos that clearly showed the logo and the building and the company name beneath it. Evidence. Real visual undeniable evidence. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From clarity. From certainty. This changed everything. This was more than just stolen credit. This was commercial use of my work without authorization. This was exactly what my freelance contract said they couldn't do. I took photos for 10 minutes straight, documenting everything. The afternoon light made the metallic logo shine, making it impossible to deny what I was seeing. This was going to destroy him. The attorney I found came highly recommended. Her name was Quinn, and she had a reputation for handling intellectual property cases. I walked into her office carrying copies of everything. My freelance contract, photos of the logo on the building, examples of my other designs that Trent had claimed as his own. Quinn scanned through my contract slowly, her eyes moving carefully across each page. Then she leaned back in her chair and looked at me over her glasses. "You're telling me they're using this commercially?" she asked, tapping the contract with her pen. "Yes," I said. "On their new building. Huge. Public display." She exhaled slowly. "This isn't small, Riley. Not even close. They've violated multiple clauses here. This is serious intellectual property theft." For the first time since Trent cut my pay, hope flickered inside me. Real hope. Not revenge hope. Justice hope. There was actually a legal path forward. "What does this mean?" I asked. "It means," Quinn said, leaning forward, "that we have options. But before I recommend anything, I need to know something. Did they know the intellectual property rights weren't transferred to them?" That question made me remember something crucial. An email. Kept everything. I showed Quinn the email I'd found in my archives. It was from 6 months ago, from Trent. He was asking me for the editable logo files because the company's IT department had lost the originals in some database crash. The email said, "Can you send over the source files for the original logo? We need them for the expansion project. Make sure they're editable." He'd wanted them because he thought the company owned them. He'd assumed the copyright had transferred automatically when I became a full-time employee. He had no idea that my freelance contract explicitly said the rights remained mine. But the thing was, he should have known. He was the one who hired me. He was the one who would have signed off on that contract initially. Even if he didn't read it carefully, he had a responsibility to know what it said. Quinn's eyes widened as she read through the email exchange. "This is negligent," she said. "And it's absolutely actionable." He knew to ask for the files, which means he knew there was a question about ownership. But he went ahead and used them anyway. "What do we do?" I asked. She took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "Riley, I need to ask you something important. Do you want compensation, or do you want collapse?" I didn't hesitate. "Collapse," I said. "But the legal kind. Nothing illegal. Nothing that's revenge. Just truth." Quinn nodded like she'd expected that answer. "Then we do everything by the book. Everything documented. Everything above board. We let the facts speak for themselves, and we let his own arrogance destroy him." "That's what I want," I said. "I want him to realize that you can't just take what isn't yours. I want the company to realize what he's done. But I want it to happen because it's the truth, not because I did something wrong." Over the next 2 weeks, Quinn helped me gather evidence. Real solid evidence. We documented everything carefully. Nothing could be questioned. Nothing could be dismissed as exaggeration. She asked me if I had more evidence beyond what I'd already shown her. I told her I had digital files, timestamped drafts from my freelance work, revision notes showing my decisions, images of emails where Trent approved designs before I finalized them, even voice memos from meetings where I documented what was being asked of me. Bring it all, Quinn said. We're going to build a case so strong they won't have any choice but to admit what happened. My old cloud archives were perfectly organized. Years of work, backed up and stored safely. I pulled everything together. Every draft, every revision, every email exchange. Time-stamped proof that I'd created this work before the company even existed in its current form. The logo, the color palette, the typography system, the entire visual identity that Trent had claimed as his own. All of it traced back to me, with dates and times that couldn't be argued with. I found voice memos from meetings where I'd been briefed on what the company wanted. My voice explaining my creative choices. My voice describing how I'd solved design problems. All recorded, all dated, all undeniable. Trent had built an entire expansion company on intellectual property that wasn't his. On designs he'd stolen from me. On work he'd claimed credit for, knowing full well that it wasn't his to claim. Quinn listened as I explained everything. She took detailed notes. She asked questions. She built the case piece by piece, making it absolutely bulletproof. Then I discovered something else. Something I hadn't expected to find. In one of my old folders I found the pitch decks. The presentations that Trent had made to investors about the sister company expansion. I opened them and started scrolling through. Every single visual element was mine. Every slide, every design, every graphic. The fresh, proprietary visual identity that Trent had bragged about in the team meeting was completely made up of my work. Work he'd used without permission, without payment, without even telling me. I showed this to Quinn. Her reaction was almost funny. She actually laughed. Not a happy laugh. A laugh that said this case was now absolutely airtight. This is catastrophic for them, she said, shaking her head. Completely catastrophic. He's presented stolen work to investors as proprietary designs. He's misrepresented the intellectual property. He's made business decisions based on fraud. What does that mean? Yes. It means, Quinn said, that we have him. Completely. There's no defense here. There's no way out of this. We just have to present it correctly. She started drafting the cease and desist letter. Legal language carefully chosen. Professional. Final. There was nothing emotional about it. It was just facts, laid out in the clearest possible language. The cease and desist packet was brutal in its clarity. Not aggressive. Not emotional. Just true. And truth, it turned out, was far more powerful than anger. The letter outlined everything. The intellectual property violation. The unauthorized commercial use. The misrepresentation to investors. The theft of work. It demanded immediate removal of all branding materials. It outlined damages. It mentioned the possibility of legal injunction. Quinn sent it to corporate, to their legal team, to HR, and directly to Trent. Everywhere at once. No warning. No negotiation. Just the truth delivered officially. I felt no guilt when I saw that letter go out. No second thoughts. No regrets. Felt relief. Felt clarity. I felt like I was finally standing up for myself in the way I should have from the beginning. How long until something happens? Asked Quinn. Not long, she said. They'll panic. They'll call emergency meetings. They'll realize how serious this is. She was right. The texts started coming the next morning. From co-workers who still had my number. What did you do? Trent is losing it. They shut down the whole design floor. Nobody knows what's happening. The sister company unveiling is supposed to be next week. Everyone's freaking out. I didn't respond to any of them. I just let the messages pile up. Let the chaos unfold without me. The sister company launch was supposed to be a big deal. A huge event with investors and media and all kinds of important people. Without the branding, without the visual identity, they had nothing. They couldn't launch. They couldn't present. They couldn't do anything. Trent had built the entire expansion on stolen work. Without that work, the whole thing collapsed. More messages came in. Screenshots this time. Messages from Trent's email that people had somehow gotten. Him blaming everyone but himself. Yelling at team members. Demanding explanations. Creating chaos trying to figure out what had gone wrong. He still didn't understand. He still thought this was about the designs themselves. He didn't realize yet that this was about him being caught. Char sent me an email. Subject line: "Can we discuss an amicable resolution?" Translation: "We are absolutely terrified." I forwarded the email to Quinn without responding. She replied within minutes, sending her own email directly to their legal team. All communication regarding this matter goes through my office. Any further contact with my client will be considered harassment. That phrase sat in my inbox like armor. Protection. Power. I wasn't vulnerable anymore. I had someone fighting for me, someone who understood the law, someone who couldn't be pushed around. I felt powerful for the first time in months. Months of Trent making me feel small. Months of pay cuts and stolen work and public humiliation. And now, suddenly, I was the one with leverage. A coworker, someone I'd trained and mentored over the years, sent me a text with a voice recording attached. I listened to it in my apartment, alone, with headphones on. It was Trent, screaming. She set me up. She planned this the entire time. His voice was raw with anger and something that sounded like fear. Doors were slamming in the background. Other people were yelling or trying to calm him down. She's trying to destroy me. I gave her opportunities, and this is how she repays me. This is betrayal. Hearing my name in his rage should have hurt. Should have made me feel guilty for what I'd done. But it didn't. Instead, it felt like justice. Like watching someone face the consequences of their own actions. He wasn't angry at me for telling the truth. He was angry at me for getting caught. There was a difference, and that difference mattered. Other co-workers began reaching out. Rumors were spreading through the company like wildfire. Corporate was investigating. External auditors had been brought in. The scandal was getting bigger and bigger, spreading beyond just Trent and me into something that affected the entire company's reputation. I didn't feel guilty about that either. The company had stood by while Trent stole my work. HR had helped him. Everyone had known, at least on some level, that something wasn't right. But nobody had done anything. So maybe it was time for all of them to face consequences too. The investigation moved quickly. Corporate was clearly taking it seriously. They traced the logo back to my freelance contract. They traced the emails showing Trent requesting files he knew he didn't have the right to request. They traced the pitch decks to my original designs. Everything pointed directly to Trent. They interviewed people. Team members had to explain what they knew and when they knew it. HR had to explain their involvement in the pay cut. The chain of decision-making was laid bare. Someone from corporate contacted Quinn. They wanted to meet. They wanted to talk about a settlement. They wanted to make this go away before it got more public, more damaging, more expensive. They're terrified, Quinn told me over the phone. They realize how serious this is. How much this could cost them if it goes to court. They want to settle. What do I do? Yes. You let me handle it, Quinn said. But Riley, you should know something. You're going to win this. Not maybe. Not probably. You're going to win. The only question now is how much. The sister company launch had been postponed indefinitely. The massive logo on the building's wall was being covered. Contractors were told to halt all signage installation immediately. Investors were demanding answers. The whole project was basically on hold. The company looked paralyzed. Trent had frozen everything trying to figure out how to fix the situation. But there was no fixing it. The truth was out. The intellectual property violation was documented. His theft was proven. I drove past the construction site one evening and saw workers covering my logo with a blank tarp. Covering it like it had never existed. Like I had never existed. But it did exist. And I did exist. And that was what mattered. Quinn called me 3 days later. They want to meet, she said. At a settlement table. They're ready to talk numbers. I'm not going, I told her. I know, Quinn said. That's why I'm going to handle it myself. Quinn went to the settlement meeting without me. She told me afterward what it was like. Corporate executives in a conference room, sweating through their suits, nervous about what was going to happen next. Their legal team shaking, knowing they didn't have a defense. Trent sitting small and pale and furious, knowing his career was probably over. They offered a number first. It was decent, probably what most people would have accepted. Quinn countered with triple. The room went silent. But then, slowly, they came back with an offer that was 90% of what Quinn had asked for. They wanted this done. They wanted it quiet. They wanted it finished. Quinn came back to me with the number. It was substantial. It was real money. It was more than I'd made in years. But there was one more condition. One thing that mattered more than the money. They have to agree that Trent signs a personal admission of wrongdoing, Quinn explained. Not the company. Trent, personally, admitting everything he did. Will he do it? Asked. He will, Quinn said. Because the alternative is going to court, losing there, and dealing with this for years while his reputation gets destroyed publicly anyway. This way he gets some dignity, some control. This way he just quietly disappears. The admission document was raw and complete. It said everything that needed to be said. Trent had knowingly used copyrighted work that didn't belong to him. He'd misrepresented authorship to investors and colleagues. He'd retaliated against me for refusing to work weekends. He'd violated intellectual property law. He'd stolen designs. Every word true. Every sentence documented and proven. When Trent signed that document, Quinn told me later. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the pen. His signature was messy and weak. He looked like a man who understood, finally, that his actions had consequences. I never had to see him again. Never had to look him in the face. Never had to hear him make excuses. The legal system had done what I needed it to do. It had forced him to admit the truth. My phone buzzed that afternoon. A message from a creative agency I'd admired for years. The director had somehow found out about what happened. About the intellectual property case. About me standing up for myself. We've seen your work, the message said. We'd love to talk. I went to the interview 2 weeks later, after everything was officially settled. I walked into that agency with my head up, carrying a portfolio of my designs. The real ones. The ones I could prove were mine. The director, a woman named Victoria who'd been in the industry for 20 years, looked at my work for a long time without saying anything. Finally, she looked up at me. I've been following your designs for years, she said. Before I even knew your name. Before I knew you as a person. I just knew that whoever was creating this work was incredibly talented. I wanted to meet you. You knew my work. I asked, surprised. I knew your work, she confirmed. Even when you didn't get credit for it. The style was always distinctive. The vision was always clear. I could tell you apart from everyone else, even when your name wasn't on it. That meant something to me. That this person, this respected person in my industry, could see my talent even when I'd been invisible. The interview went on for hours. They offered me a position as a senior designer leading a team. The salary they offered was double what I'd been making before. Double. Accepted. The news about Trent's departure came 2 days later. The company announced publicly that he'd chosen to pursue other opportunities, which was corporate speak for. He was forced out in disgrace and we're not going to explain why. His career was essentially over. Nobody in the industry would hire someone who'd been caught stealing intellectual property from an employee and then retaliating against her for exposing him. His reputation was destroyed, not by me but by the truth. My career was just beginning. I drove past the sister company building one last time just to see. The massive metallic logo that had been my design was completely gone. Covered. Wiped clean. It was like it had never existed on that wall at all. But it had. And I had seen it. And that had changed everything. My new agency called me into a meeting my first week. They wanted to know if I'd be interested in leading a major rebranding project for one of their biggest clients. A project that would be completely mine. Completely credited to me. Completely acknowledged as my work. I said yes without hesitation. The project took 6 months. 6 months of creative work, of collaboration with teams that respected my vision, of building something beautiful and being recognized for it. At the end, my name was on it. Not hidden. Not stolen. Proudly displayed as the lead designer. I never spoke to Trent again. He never tried to contact me. He just faded away, the consequence of his own bad decisions finally catching up with him. I built a career after that where nobody would ever question my worth. Where my work was always credited to me. Where I stood up for myself and didn't accept being treated as less than I was. The truth I learned doesn't need to shout to be powerful. It just needs to exist, documented and real, waiting for the moment when someone tries to hide it. My revenge was simple. I told the truth. And the truth destroyed the lies far better than anything I could have done out of anger ever would have. Trent's arrogance had given me the evidence I needed. His theft had given me the legal foundation. His retaliation had given me the right to fight back. And in the end, the system worked exactly as it was supposed to. The guilty faced consequences. The innocent moved forward. And justice, real justice, was finally served. I never looked back after that. I just kept building, keep creating, keep proving through my work and my integrity that I was always worth far more than anyone had ever paid me.